Welcome back to our channel where we share updates and untold stories about Catherine, Princess of Wales and her royal family. Today we bring you some news. She went too far. Camilla versus Princess Anne erupts at Balmoral. According to a source close to the situation, there was a meeting of top working members at the Balmoral summit. There is stunning proof that Queen Camilla set up her daughter to take over Princess Anne's and was exposed in front of everyone. Camilla, the queen consort, came to Buckingham Palace thinking that position formality and a carefully controlled public presence would give her unquestionable power. Her life had taken her from being a controversial peripheral figure in the royal circle to being at its center. This had taught her that being seen could make things true if done with care and expertise. But within the palace's ancient stone, she found an older currency than titles or public favor, a code of honor and tradition that was so deeply established that status alone could not change it. Camilla thought that the institution would protect not just its public image, but also the integrity of its hereditary rights. She was wrong about how much it would protect her own lineage. By attacking Princess Anne, the Princess Royal, who is a symbol of duty and continuity, and by extension Anne's daughter Zara Tyndall, she crossed into a territory where ceremonial disrespect and family disrespect were the same thing. The ensuing struggle was both personal and institutional. It caused two divergent ideas of legitimacy to crash against each other. Camilla, who knew a lot about contemporary media management and the politics of reinvention, thought that coronation profile pieces and headline placements might make a new domestic order seem real. Anne and Zara were distinct because they had a different understanding of what made them legitimate. They had a strong sense of what their family owed to itself and to history, which was based on their upbringing and demonstrated service. At first glance, the fight looked like a fight between two powerful women, a queen consort trying to set up a new hierarchy and a princess royal fighting against it. But it was really about deeper fears about who could claim the rituals that held the monarchy together, and whether bloodline and the memory of a long-reigning monarch could be changed at will. The princess who wouldn't give, in the first sign of trouble in the palace, occurred at the first royal dinner after Charles became king. The big ballrooms sparkled beneath the chandeliers, and the gold-framed mirrors made the show even better. A hush of convention kept the laughing and talking that swept throughout the floor in check. Camilla, dressed in green silk and sitting next to the king, looked like a queen consort at the height of her public legitimacy. The event was planned as a stage set to show support for the new order. It gave Camilla the chance to take over the visual and ceremonial space usually allocated for long-term partners. The guests proceeded through the receiving line with the choreography of centuries, bows, curtsies, and the little exact movements that turn intimate loyalty into public theater. For some people in the room, the act was automatic. For others, it was planned a performance that was judged against the changing optics of the moment. But Princess Anne was different. Her presence has always been a statement of principle and stance, a symbol of responsibility rather than a show, and that night her posture was very clear. Anne stayed straight with her shoulders squared and her eyes set beyond Camilla. The curtsy was not offered even if the heads and shoulders of the other people were bowed in unison. The gesture, or lack of one, was planned. It seemed like a public gesture of restraint, not angry disobedience for the sake of it, but a statement of the limitations of mutual recognition. Press cameras captured the scene of one person standing firm among a sea of others who were bowing down to them. International critics framed the incident in ways that made it more dramatic. For example, a Paris newspaper carried a title that said, "La princesse qui ne s'incline pas," which means, "the princess who doesn't bow." This was a sophisticated way of saying that she was standing up for what she believed in, instead of being a brat. Camilla looked at the images in the quiet of Clarence House, and felt an old fear come back, the feeling of the margins narrowing. Later, an insider claimed she flipped the newspaper over and ran her fingers through her hair until her knuckles became white. She was torn between a grin for the cameras and a sharpness for private ears. King Charles attempted to calm her down by saying in a quiet voice, Don't worry about her. It's just Anne being Anne. He wanted to calm her down, but the statement didn't help. For Camilla, the king's reluctance to allow a curtsy turned a private family tradition into a public break. She perceived not just resistance, but a symbolic refusal, an act that showed where the Princess Royal stood in the hierarchy of love and ritual. In the stillness that followed the tragedy, Camilla said to an empty room, "If she won't bow to me, I'll make the world bow to my daughter." This sentence was more than just a fleeting pledge. It was a promise of a plan to come. Anne's dislike of performative respect came from years of experience. She was the late Queen's only daughter and was raised in a disciplined environment that valued service over position and labor over ceremony. She had a long list of duties in her life, serving in the Navy, competing in Olympic-level horseback riding for the sake of quality rather than for show, and refusing to let her public persona get in the way of her private success. Anne's refusal to curtsy that night showed that she was attached to a set of ideas about who represented the monarchy's continuance. These weren't just for show. They were a code that had been used to control behavior in the Windsor family for centuries. Anne thought that ceremony only meant anything if it showed a deep dedication to service. She thought that hollow gestures instead of content were disgusting. The echo of Gatcombe Park. Anne's blueprint of another world where fields and stables molded identity was the opposite of Buckingham's gold and crystal, which were a theater of rituals. Zara, whose full name is Philippa Zara Tyndall, grew up among jumps and stables instead of pageantry. Anne had asked that her children not use royal titles so they wouldn't have to deal with the responsibilities of a glamorous public life and could have some normalcy. The choice was both practical and doctrinal. It created a distinct kind of closeness to royal identity, one where ancestry was important without having to keep an eye on court responsibilities. Gatcombe's lanes and arenas taught kids how to be strong, self-controlled, and good at what they do without any frills. Anne taught Zara the rules of not bending quickly, such as how to confront a hard look instead of avoiding it, and how to keep her shoulders straight even when the wind changed in public. Every time someone refused to go along with a staged event, they learned a subtle lesson. Genuine authority is acquired by consistency and action, not by following orders. Camilla meticulously set up the receiving line for a special gathering at Kensington Palace a few weeks after the supper. It was a little but meaningful dance, putting Laura Lopes, Camilla's daughter from her first marriage, and a lady who wasn't reared in the royal spotlight where she would be most visible, was a calculated move to change the way others saw her. It was evident, even if it wasn't spoken, that Zara should still do a deep curtsy to the queen consort, even though she wasn't a title holder. Camilla thought that this was a sign of respect that should come naturally, no matter what. Zara's answer was serious, and to the point, a courteous but brief nod, a gesture that was both polite and firm. The hush that came after seemed too big for the slight movement. People wrote down what they saw in their notebooks, and the royal grapevine was buzzing with rumors. Camilla thought the nod was rude and showed that the person didn't appreciate her. On the way home, she let out a complaint she had probably been holding in for months. She is just like her mother, stubborn, proud, and completely unaware of her place in this family. Charles, who was used to how things worked in the family, didn't say much. He knew that Zara's calm demeanor was more about habit than rudeness. Zara's tiny movement was not dramatic, but it was important because it showed that the argument had moved on to the next generation. Camilla's fight, which was based on rights of position and precedence, turned into a public battle between two mother-daughter couples. For Zara, Anne was more of a guide than an enemy. The little nod was part of a bigger reluctance to be easily moved. The act was an insult to Camilla's plan to make her daughter more visible and modernize the family business. The Holyrood House battle. The event moved to Scotland at the start of summer. The Youth of the Crown charity event at Holyrood House was meant to show how young people might become involved in public service and to connect the consort's public image with civic redevelopment. The event was planned for Camilla since she was now more comfortable being in public and wanted to strengthen her daughter's presence in the family's public face. She told her advisors at Clarence House to change the schedule so that Laura could give the opening speech. This was a high-profile spot that might get good press and connect Laura's name with a cause that the royal family supports. Organizers were nervous, but followed the palace's orders. The palace's approval is strong, and officials typically choose to seem helpful rather than hostile when it comes to public logistics. But Anne's friends and family did note the change in the calendar. The Princess Royal got the news and didn't see the change in schedule as a whim to be dealt with. Instead, she saw it as a task to be faced. Anne didn't want to address Camilla directly, so she took a more indirect approach. She sent an envelope to the person in charge of the event via one of her most trusted assistants. It had Zara's speech and a short handwritten note on pale blue paper that said, "If you want this event to mean what it should, you will let my daughter speak." The note didn't show any anger. It was written by someone who was used to settling family disputes through institutional power rather than dramatic rebuke. It was clear what they meant going through with the plan would risk making the cause seem less important in favor of a family agenda. Laura was the first to take the lectern in the afternoon. Her delivery was shaky, and she read the lines off the page with a stance that showed she was uncomfortable since she was forced into a position she hadn't practiced for. The applause was pleasant, but not very loud. In the palace's ecology, these kinds of reactions are more than just preferences. They are signals for the next act. A little while later, there was another announcement. Lady Zara Tyndall will speak to the audience on behalf of the royal family. Zara's entry was quite different from the others. She donned a blue dress that was picked for its low cost. It wasn't flashy, but it did convey calm power. She wouldn't turn to look at the rows or say hello to the other ladies on the dais. Instead of looking at the people in the room as a mob to calm down, she looked them in the eye and said clearly, "I may not be a princess, but I was raised by one to believe that truth is what makes a person royal, not a throne. Today we honor lasting values, service, loyalty, and devotion to a legacy." The words hit home like a well-thought-out statement instead of an assault on the person. They included the audience and asked for agreement instead of indignation. The response was quick. The clapping grew and grew until it was almost an ovation. The mood in the room changed from polite ceremonial to a wave of mutual support. Camilla grasped her handkerchief tightly, and Laura's head dropped in shame. Anne's face was still inscrutable, but many who knew her afterward claimed that there was always a calm pride in her gaze. The message was clear. Trying to push a Windsor to the edge of the dance floor usually makes the Windsor who doesn't want to be pushed to the edge stronger. In an instant, Zara's presence had destroyed the story Camilla was trying to tell. The clash of legacies in Windsor. The conflict spread much further. In public, top royals met at Windsor Castle in October to talk about how to improve their outreach efforts. In private, it became a staged fight between two ideas about what the monarchy's future should look like. Camilla came up with a plan called the New Queen's Line, which was meant to be a new way to highlight how modern women support the crown. Laura was chosen to be the first figurehead for the program. The idea was a clear effort to put power back in the hands of Camilla's immediate family, bringing new images in line with how things are done at the institution. There were breaks while the concept floated in the air. King Charles looked for phrases that might connect family politics with his obligation to the public. Prince William, who was becoming more aware of how family problems looked to the public and how they affected the stability of institutions, showed a momentary sign of annoyance by rolling his eyes. The older courtiers in the room looked at each other carefully. Formal proposals at the palace are never only for business. They show that you are part of the institution's story and are part of its ownership. Anne came back with a counterproposal dubbed the Legacy of Service. Her plan honored the monarchy's core values of responsibility, devotion, and public service. She suggested that Zara be the first ambassador for the enterprise. There was a big difference in the two moms' ideas. Camilla's ideas seemed like a modernizing move to improve the monarchy's image via carefully chosen representation. Anne's idea that went against the grain was a reaffirmation of continuity. It was an appeal to the institution's long-standing duties rather than a way to promote herself. Camilla said that Anne was using her daughter as a pawn in an old family fight. Anne replied firmly that she had taught her daughter to protect her honor and stand up for what she believed in, especially against people who claimed to be part of the Windsor Mountbatten family, but weren't. Those words had power because they made it seem like the late Queen was always there like a law in the house. The late King's example was not emotional ballast for the Princess Royal. It was a set of rules. The room felt it like a wind, a call to power that was older than the people who were there. King Charles started to speak to end the standoff, but he hesitated. It was clear that it was hard to decide between two family members who both thought they were morally superior. Prince William gave Anne a slight nod of agreement, knowing that it would affect the next generation. The discussion concluded without a solution. Not only was there disagreement, but viewpoints had become more entrenched. Camilla departed with the intention of responding, but Anne left with a strategic kind of patience. The Queen's Revenge and the Last Stand. Camilla changed her plans when winter crept over the Scottish Highlands and the shadows became longer at Clarence House. Ceremonial acts in public couldn't just be reactions. They had to be well planned. A war of attrition started. Zara's name began to disappear from schedules. People who had accepted invitations either disappeared or didn't renew them. Official journals restricted Zara from going to events where she might get noticed. Clarence House's communications team started to raise Laura's image by putting nice stories about her in certain places. These stories were meant to show Laura as a contemporary royal figure who was at ease in the limelight. The work was as much about how things looked as how they worked. Gatcombe Park saw the erasing happen. Zara saw the absences as tiny hurts, maybe a missed chance, but not a moral failure. She dealt with it with the serenity she learned as a child. She didn't whine in public or make a big deal out of it. She just kept saying no to being the center of attention. Anne, on the other hand, couldn't bear it when others attacked her daughter's reputation. If the palace could pull off an unseen squeeze, she would react in a manner that fit with its formality and finality. She drove to Clarence House without any ceremony and entered a drawing room where many intimate fights and makeups have taken place. Camilla greeted her in the usual way, but the air was thick with unsaid accusations. Anne didn't get angry with words. She looked at Camilla in a way that had worked on weaker pleadings before. "You can wear as many crowns as you want, Camilla," she continued, her voice steady. "But you crossed a line when you went after my daughter. We don't give up our own in this family." The words were a silent threat. Camilla objected, saying that things needed to change and become better. Anne's tone was so firm that it stopped any argument. She departed without making threats, just stating a fact. Witnesses subsequently said that Camilla's response was not only anger, but also the beginning of understanding that certain loyalties can't be made up by press releases or clothing choices. The last fight happened on a significant day, September 8th, the first anniversary of Queen Elizabeth II's death. The stones of Westminster Hall have seen state ceremonies and the passing of years. This is where a memorial service was intended to be beautiful, serious, and clearly reverent. Camilla had a big part in planning the event. She wanted Laura to stand next to her for the main candle lighting, which was meant to show Laura as a contemporary face of the monarchy's tale. The meaning behind the symbols was important in rituals, and memories being close to someone means being related to them, and by extension, belonging. The venue was set up with a simple color scheme, white flowers, low light, and a feeling of shared grief that went along with the show. Camilla waited at the candle table, calm and waiting for the confirmation that the program promised. Anne, who was sitting in the first row, stood up and disrupted the proceedings with a voice that broke through the silence. She remarked, "I don't like this process. This is an homage to a king or queen to whom you, Camilla, did not bow down throughout her lifetime. I will not accept that it is right to put someone who does not have Windsor Mountbatten blood and no legitimate royal position at the head of this national tribute." The hall appeared to be holding its breath. Anne pulled a piece of paper out of her purse and said it was an official documentation of the late Queen's ceremonial succession process. Anne added that the paper listed the late Queen's chosen representative for specific remembrances. Anne's version indicated that this person was her granddaughter, Zara Tyndall. The paper's formality or persuasive nature didn't matter as much as its effect. The claim that it existed and that it contained the late monarch's explicit instruction gave it procedural weight that made it hard to dismiss as mere theatrics. The impact was quick and clear. The older people in the room, who were professional courtiers and family elders, changed their minds. Prince William got up, walked up to Zara, and the two of them walked up to the candles. Zara donned a black dress with a high collar and the late Queen's personal service medal. She didn't want to impress anybody. She only wanted to show that she was still serving, which the audience understood. William held her hand in a ceremonial way that also had political meaning. The continuance of the dynasty was being negotiated in public rather than secretly. The cameras caught the scene: Zara and William in the middle, Camilla and Laura on the edge. Pictures were compelling right away and soon became the story's shorthand. Headlines around the world framed the moment as a restoration of a kind: royal legacy restored, Zara shines, Laura dims. Social media and news cycles replayed the scene. The candle that symbolically memorialized a monarch was lit by a woman whose public standing had been undercut by choreography but restored by lineage and ritual. To many people, the scenario seemed like a rejection. The monarchy's unwritten rules, its emphasis on the continuance of certain ceremonial positions, and the respect they commanded had won out against Camilla's desire to change things. The aftermath and the truth that wasn't said. The palace remained quiet for the next week. At Buckingham, aides and courtiers agreed that the picture of Zara and William lighting the candle was the most important one of the event. The Royal Advisory Council, which is made up of a mix of experienced courtiers and older family friends, gathered quickly to talk about what this meant for the institution. As a rule, they didn't publicly criticize family conflicts. But behind closed doors, they all agreed that Camilla's effort to change the order of succession and raise her daughter in the way she had tried was against a code that the family could not accept. Their silent decision, which was conveyed via private channels, took away Camilla's power to do certain royal ceremonial tasks. It wasn't an ejection, it was a precaution taken by an organization that values tradition and the look of togetherness. The council thought that the equilibrium had been upset, so they took the step to try to fix it. The old guard at the palace saw the decision as a rebuke. There are limitations to using the memory of a king or queen for a current goal. After that, Clarence House reset. Laura's rise to fame in the media stories went away. Profiles written to make her the contemporary face of the monarchy were crumpled up and put away. Camilla backed off from strenuous efforts to put her daughter in formal ceremonies. She ripped up a speech she had written for Laura in the quiet of her office. It was a modest, private unmaking that screamed louder than public declarations. Public message returned to a familiar rhythm, continuity, service, and a careful regard for borders of symbol and legacy that had been obscured for a short time. Anne read the council's letter in Gatcombe Park and let herself smile quietly. If you could call it a win, it wasn't a show of strength. It was a way to keep things under control. She had kept her kids safe from being forced to change their public identity. She didn't want any hoopla or victory. For her, the key was to uphold the values that the late Queen had embodied, a standard by which the family would be judged. Some wounds didn't heal. People still kept secrets about what they spoke about behind palace doors. Ambassadors and diplomats who saw the public dance said the tension was an indication that the institutions were weak. At a later diplomatic function, a French ambassador asked Anne, with a hint of curiosity and maybe a little diplomatic sting, whether she would ever make up with the Queen. Anne took a slow sip of tea and spoke in a way that made it clear she would not change her mind. She could ignore palace games, but she would never forgive anybody who hurt her daughter. Her comments did not mean that they would always be enemies. They were a clear line in their home family loyalty was more important than political compromise. Camilla did not lose completely. She kept her title and her seat next to the king, and many people still loved her. But among the family's power corridors, the event was seen as a failure to understand that certain loyalties and kinds of legitimacy are hard to change. Popularity and ceremony may give someone titular authority. Deeper power, on the other hand, is more stable and comes from a mix of blood memory and the rituals that make people feel like they belong. Anne, the princess who wouldn't bow, has protected a heritage where certain inheritances are seen as untouchable. Zara, who had been taught to meet people's eyes instead of bowing at every change in trend or favor, was living testimony of that instruction. The silent war, the creeping change of attitude, the public fights, and the secret ultimatums ended in a way that kept the palace safe, but made it plain that there are limitations to how much you can change things. The letter of power had changed because of Camilla's coronation, but the family's unwritten standards for how to do things had not changed at that moment. In the end, there was no need for a big dethronement. The monarchy's ancient systems, its councils, its elders, and its rituals still had the power to change things. The winner of this event was not someone who was crowned by public acclaim, but rather the idea that there are loyalties and inheritances in the family structure that no amount of attention can change. The formalities of a coronation may give people names and duties, but the unwritten code, the little persistent traditions, and the memory of a long reign still has a lot of power. Thank you for watching the video. Please let us know your thoughts and goodbye for now.